And what they needed to see was American boys and girls going house to house from Basra to Baghdad and basically saying, which part of this sentence don't you understand? You don't think, we care about our open society? Well, suck on this. We hit Iraq because we could.
Iraqi soldiers emerged to surrender.
The Iraq War was a major projection of American power in the Middle East following 9/11. For some, the US-led invasion in 2003 was about answering the attacks.
I just saw that. Did you see it?
For others, it was about taking Iraq's oil and giving the US control over global energy supplies. But for one group, Iraq was about a vision for a new world based on aggressive and interventionalist US foreign policy. The neoconservatives saw breaking Iraq as essential to its vision. But how did military intervention become a focal point for them? On the 31st of October 1998, the US Congress passed the Iraq Liberation Act, which committed American foreign policy to the removal of Saddam Hussein from power. President Bill Clinton signed the act into law, and it would become the basis of Congress's 2002 vote in favor of US military action in Iraq.
What we want and what we will work for is a government in Iraq that represents and respects its people, not represses them.
The Iraq Liberation Act has its roots in a letter sent to President Clinton in January 1998 by a think tank called the Project for the New America Century, which called for the United States to commit itself to toppling the Ba'athist regime. The letter, which was signed by a number of influential politicians including Donald Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, John Bolton, Richard Pohl and others, said the then existing US foreign policy of containing Saddam Hussein had failed. His regime had violated a number of restrictions imposed upon it, and Baghdad's lack of cooperation with the UN's weapons inspectors meant it was possible Iraq had rebuilt its chemical and biological weapons capability. The Iraqi president was dangerous and posed a threat to American security, the letter cautioned. The Project for the New American Century was established to promote America's global leadership and Washington as a unipolar superpower. The project belonged to a semi-shadowy group called the neoconservatives or the New Conservatives. While there is much debate about the movement, most trace the origins of neoconservatism to the intellectual circles of German-American philosopher Leo Strauss and his students in the 1960s. Strauss argued, the crisis of the West consists in the West having become uncertain of its purpose, and his attempt to give Westerners faith in the classical past is cited as a major influence over neoconservative thought, although many still debate whether or not Strauss was a neoconservative. Most of those who became neoconservatives came from Marxist, Trotskyist, Liberal and Democratic Party circles. The term neoconservative was coined by fellow leftist opponents as a term of abuse at their former comrades, which the neoconservatives decided to adopt anyway. What drove the converts to the movement was a sense of American liberalism had eroded itself and produced a society that no longer knew what to believe or understood the moral superiority of the United States. There was a powerful evil out there, and Americans were increasingly blind to it, the neoconservatives believed. In the 1970s and 1980s, they fixated on the Soviet Union and sought to drive a more aggressive policy towards it. Under President Ronald Reagan, many neoconservatives made it into second and third tier political positions in his administration. However, they grew disillusioned with many of Reagan's foreign policy stances.
To ignore the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire.
Hi, I'm calling from Clinton for President.
By the 1990s, the neoconservatives were no longer in power, and had to re-articulate their vision in light of the collapse of the Soviet Union. On the 2nd of August 1990, Iraqi President Saddam Hussein ordered his troops to cross the border into Kuwait over a dispute to do with funds Baghdad owed its neighbour, slant oil drilling, and suspicion Kuwait was trying to undermine his leadership. On the 17th of January 1991, a US-led international coalition began military operations to remove Iraq from Kuwait. By the 28th of February, Iraq had fully retreated from Kuwait, and in March and April 1991 there was an uprising by the Shia and Kurdish groups against Saddam. While the US seemed to support these actions, George Bush refused direct military support and decided to go no further. This decision angered neoconservatives, but it also gave them a new direction. Iraq would become their target. Through op-eds, publications, lobbying and other activities, the neoconservatives cultivated an image of Iraq that posed a threat to Western democracies.
Economic sanctions, in this instance, if fully enforced, can be very, very effective.
One man would really help the neoconservatives build their case: Ahmed Chalabi. Chalabi was a wealthy Iraqi exile with ties to the Jordanian banking industry. In the 1990s, while living in the United Kingdom, he led efforts to oppose Saddam Hussein from abroad, bringing together different groups. He even tried to organize coup attempts against the Iraqi dictator, which failed.
There is a comprehensive plan to help the Iraqi opposition overthrow Saddam.
None of this mattered because in Ahmed Chalabi, the neoconservatives found the man they thought could replace Saddam Hussein. Western educated and well connected, Chalabi reflected what the neoconservatives wanted. He became a critical source of information for their movement and the Bush administration. Chalabi also fed false intelligence about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda to the CIA.
I know Americans are concerned.
After George W. Bush became president in 2000, the neoconservatives found themselves back in power with more influence than under Reagan. Key positions were handed to them. The day after the 11th of September 2001 terrorist attacks on New York City and Washington, D.C., one of the signatories of the New American Century letter to Bill Clinton, Donald Rumsfeld, told staffers to look for evidence of Iraqi involvement in the attacks. It was clear to many on the inside of the Bush administration, Iraq was likely to become a target despite no connections to Al-Qaeda or the attacks.
The Bush administration, I think, correctly judged that both on moral grounds, in terms of what we owed the people of Iraq, and on geopolitical grounds, in terms of the future of the Middle East, it was right to go in and to liberate the people of Iraq.
On the 20th of September 2001, George W. Bush declared, "Either you're with us or you're with the terrorists," and in January 2002 labelled Iraq as part of the axis of evil. Both declarations demonstrate the clear neoconservative hold over his administration. The road to invading Iraq was paved.